All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining me. My name is Cameron Shamdursky. I am a friend, and we're all friends are of Bob Dumford. He's our friend that needs a kidney. So we have two guys here that have actually gone through the experience. Harrison Clark, give us a wave, Harrison, was in need of a kidney, and his friend Brian Rust was actually, although they were already friends, turned out to be a perfect match for Harrison, which is rather rare to have friends to turn out to be such a good match that they were able to have the surgeries, and now Harrison is doing much better, and Brian's not only a hero to so many of us, but they both are really because it's been a great story, and we just love sharing the good news, especially in light of Bob now needing a kidney within our circle of friends as well. So what I'd like to do is start with Harrison. If you could tell us kind of your story, your kidney story, for lack of a better term, and just what led us up to the need for the transplant. Was it 2 years ago now?
3 years. Three
3
years
years
ago.
ago. Okay. So if you could just share a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, definitely. Harrison Clark. I live here in Cincinnati, Ohio, Walnut Hills, and I had what's called polycystic kidney disease, (PKD), which actually is probably one of the most common um, forms of chronic kidney disease. It's actually genetic. My mother had it. Her mother had it. My mother had a kidney transplant roughly 17 years ago. She's still doing well. She's doing fine. She had gotten a kidney from a cadaver deceased donor. So that was kind of her story. So leading up to I think it was about 2002, I had started noticing I started having some high blood pressure, et cetera. Went to my family GP. And with my history, they were like, let's do a ultrasound CAT scan of your kidneys just to rule out possible kidney problems of your high blood pressure calls. We went through that. That was in Lexington, Kentucky. We went through that process and found out that I did have, indeed, cysts formed in my kidneys. So I did have polycystic kidney disease. Shortly after that, I actually volunteered for a study called HALT PKD. It was a 10-year study that was done at Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, a couple of big national, John Hopkins clinics. So I attended Cleveland Clinic for 10 years. They kind of, every 6 months I would go to Cleveland Clinic. They would track my progress. So for 10 years, I was watching every 6 months, my kidney function tick down. So fast forward to January 2017, 3 years ago, essentially my kidney function had gotten down to such to where my nephrologist, my kidney specialist, basically said, in 6 months, you're going to either need to have a transplant or you'll be on dialysis, one of the two. At that time, we started reaching out to friends, family, much similar to what we're trying to do here with Bob. Anyone who might be interested in donating. And then also we started kind of getting prepped up for in case I would have to go on dialysis. Luckily, I actually had a few people that were kind of matches. We had one person that was basically had, and it was another friend of mine. Actually, all of them were friends or family. I was really lucky that, I had a lot of people that reached out, and it was a blessing. So one friend that reached out, she was, younger female, had kids, yada, yada. The last minute, she kind of decided, hey, I don't think I want to do this. And that's when Brian had went ahead and went through testing. Amazingly, there's, I think, technically 6 parameters that you need to try to match to be a donor. And he actually matched all 6, which is pretty rare considering we're not related. Brian and I have been friends since we both moved here in about 2006. And we had met through a mutual friend and immediately kind of become really good friends. So that's kind of long story short. And then 3 years ago, June 7th, we went ahead and went through the process. June 6th. I'm sorry.
It was D-Day.
I feel like a married couple forgetting your anniversary.
Yeah. I need to put it inside my rings. So June 6th, we went through the process of the kidney transplant. And 3 years later, here we are. I go through a monthly maintenance medications, etc. One thing I will say, a kidney transplant is not a cure for kidney disease. It is a treatment, no different than dialysis or whatever form you would have, for any kind of treatment for kidney transplant. So I feel that's one thing that's very important to let people know, because and that is one thing that they'll talk about through a process. A transplant's not a cure; it's a treatment. But it is by far the best form of treatment compared to going through dialysis. Your quality of life is much more exceptional than sitting 7, 8, 10 hours 3 to 4 times a week doing dialysis. So my quality of life has been really, really good since then. So that's kind of where we're at. And we did the transplant at Christ Hospital here in Cincinnati. Excellent group of surgeons, excellent group of caregivers. The transplant team are amazing there. So
that's the group that Bob is working with as well.
Yeah.
And the one part, before we move on to Brian, the part of the celebration that I remember is that they didn't remove your existing kidneys. They simply gave you the third.
Exactly.
The three of us are members of the same Masonic Lodge, and the celebration, we had 3-bean salad in celebration of your successful transplant. So I thought that was great. So, Brian, tell me about your thought process and your emotions as you began to volunteer to get tested, and things progressed up to the day of the surgery. Tell me about your emotional experience through that.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, if anybody who I would say would be going through this, there is going to be a great deal of anxiety, fear, wondering if you've made the right choice, if you've done the right thing. Harrison mentioned that his earlier candidate decided to not do it, and for good reason. She's concerned. She had small children. She wanted to have another child. She didn't know how it would affect her health. So of course those things weighed on me as well. Christ Hospital, though, has an incredibly good program of walking you through what the process is going to be, what to expect pain-wise, what to expect psychologically, how to manage some of the stresses involved in it. And I think the greatest takeaway for me was that I really didn't have anything to worry about. Anytime you're going to have surgery, that's going to be a risk. There's no way around that. And that's something that there could be long-term health problems from that for me, but you really don't need more than one kidney. In fact, I've researched it a lot lately, just the last few years. And a big part of it is your backup kidney is just that. It's a backup kidney. It's there for you in case something happens, or you're injured in a car accident or some kind of physical event, something like that. You can live a very productive, good life with one kidney. My grandmother lived to be 98 years old with one kidney. She didn't even realize it, that she only was born with one kidney. It's surprising how many people find out through surgery or through different things. Another brother in our lodge had some medical problems, and they realized his kidney function was a little bit lower than they thought. And it turned out he only had one kidney. He's a healthy guy, runs marathons, that sort of thing. So from the standpoint of, if you're a healthy individual, if you're a healthy person, the odds of you, the mortality odds are actually almost the same for having one kidney through your life and just a general person in the public. And the reason for that is they want to make sure that you're very healthy to begin with. And if you're a healthy person, chances are that one kidney that you're going to have taken out isn't going to affect your health long term. So those are things people tell you. And of course you read the stats and then you think, well, but still it's still something that you're like, I would never try and sell anyone on this idea. But what I could tell you is, to anybody who's considering doing this, that I wish I would have known now what I knew then, because I wouldn't have had my, dark thoughts in the backyard at 2 o'clock in the morning and worrying my wife, and the concern that I had over something that actually turned out to be, from the donor standpoint, a very routine operation. And especially when you consider that for most doctors, when they perform operations, if you have need a immediate appendectomy, let's say on a Saturday night, you're going to get a doctor that has maybe never done that procedure, or maybe only seen that procedure a couple times. The doctors at Christ that perform this surgery, That's all they do. And they're the best in their field. So literally you have the best surgeon and you have the most preparation time for it. You have someone who understands exactly how to do this with the most care, that it's almost kind of like, I shouldn't have been worried. I felt I shouldn't have been concerned so much about the actual procedure. I wish I'd have known at the time that it wouldn't have affected my health in any way. By the following spring, I was already on the Appalachian Trail. I did almost 40 miles on the Appalachian Trail. I still run all the time. I work out. I was just driving within 4 weeks. So, and I'm not going to lie to you. There's definitely pain. It's a painful procedure. I had a hernia surgery earlier in my life, and I would compare it to that. I mean, there's definitely abdominal pain. There's where the cutting is and that sort of thing. So, but from an emotional standpoint, the rewards for this are, I would argue, probably this is the, when I look back on my life someday, when I'm, hopefully 95 years old or 98, if I make it to where my grandmother's age, I know I would look back at this and say, this is one of the great choices and one of the great decisions I've made, other than, maybe marrying my wife or moving to Cincinnati, joining Caliburn Lodge. I can't imagine anything that I've ever done that I'm more proud of, or that I am more happy that I did. And pain, in a sense, is a 3-week kind of thing. Their time flies really fast, and the human body heals really well. And within a year, I would say you will make a complete 100% recovery. That alone, I think, the idea that you can fix something, like, I know, like Harris is saying, it's not a cure, but you could fix somebody's situation where they may have to have dialysis. And when they do some of the testing, they do it near the dialysis lab, and you can see the people going in there. And it's not something that you would want anyone you care about or love to ever have to endure. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Bob just did his first round of dialysis. And the research on this too is, the longer you do dialysis, the less likely a kidney transplant will be effective and will work or will solve some of the initial kidney problems. So there's no question that the clock is ticking for him right now, that he's actually already on dialysis, not to mention just the physical and mental suffering that comes with that procedure on a regular basis. So the sooner that this could happen and something along these lines could occur, the better it will be for him.
To touch on his point, the success odds go up dramatically, and the longevity of keeping the donor kidney goes up dramatically with a match paired living donor, versus if you are put on the national donor list and you receive what they call a cadaver kidney, from a deceased donor. A living donor, match pair, it's a much more successful process. And kind of alluding to what Brian was saying, and I think even the whole process, for me, I didn't have a choice. I was going to have a kidney, so there was a lot of motion and stuff that went along with it, but not nearly like the donor. But I know with me, I knew that the situation was going to be much better by having, actively engaged and was lucky enough to get a living donor versus being put on a list. I think there's roughly 110,000 people on a donor list right now. Yeah. And the odds go up dramatically with a living donor versus a non-living donor.
The thing I recently learned, having not experienced anything other than from the sidelines with the two of you, is that there are several kidney networks where now you two were fortunate enough to be close friends and a wonderful match for kidneys. But now it's, especially through social media, has really helped this, is that people can donate, let's say, in Bob's name, even if they're not a match for Bob. That kidney goes to a person in need, but it also bumps Bob to the top of the list for the next one that is a match for him. So you can actually help two people. One, the person that actually receives your actual kidney, and two, Bob, the person that you donate in his or her name, gets priority within the network. So it's a really neat concept that's really flourished with social media, where before you would have to, you're probably without social media, your circle of influence was much smaller, and through the grace of God and luck of the draw, the two of you were a great match. So we're doing the network thing as well with the Kidney4Bob campaign on Facebook to maximize awareness. So it's really the whole point. There's some really great stories of people being moved for a stranger. So that certainly has happened and has been beneficial to all parties involved, just like the two of you.
We've actually spoken at events before at Christ Hospital. Harris and I have gone to a podium and spoke to other people who were interested in donating or had been donors or recipients. And we were surprised at the amount of people that did donate to someone who they didn't even know, that they had just came down and said, "Hey, I'd like to do this. This is something I want to do." And I think the thing that's kind of amazing about it is that someone like Bob, who's just a really great guy, and the quality of life, the change for him, but how this would change his life, for how little it would actually changes the donor's life. Now, I would say it physically doesn't change the donor's life at all. Mentally, emotionally, it did change me, but for the better. It kind of made me realize what's important in life, and what, Harris and I are brothers. Now, we were brothers in Caliburn Lodge, but I mean, he is literally my brother now. I mean, I feel as close to him. He's part of my family. So in the sense that, we have become bonded over this in a way that is indescribable to somebody who probably doesn't understand it or hasn't done it. The rewards of this are magnificent for the donor. I actually would argue that, I know Harrison wanted a kidney and he needed it, but I needed it just as much in a certain way. And I can't tell you how much it's blessed my life and how much it's made me feel, how much warmth. I mean, our lodge had over 5 guys that were going to sign up to get tested, that were mentally preparing themselves in the event that I wasn't a match or someone else wasn't a match. So, to show you kind of the quality of friends that he's obviously has around him. And maybe if that, there might be a chance, is there any chance at all, I guess, that maybe Bob could get some people that get tested that could potentially, instead of just doing the distribution network, could potentially go through this with him? Because I mean, it was extraordinary to do this with Harrison. I mean, we went to the hospital together, we basically recovered together. We everything, the whole step of the way. And I'm not saying that Bob wouldn't be there when the person donates and that sort of thing, but if that's an avenue that you can look into, I would highly recommend it, because I think that's, for me, I can't imagine doing this any other way. But I just understand how it works.
Well, guys, have you had to change your lifestyle at all post-op?
No, not at all. Yeah, I thought that I would. I thought that, I've definitely taken better care of myself. At least I did for the first year afterwards. I'm kind of fallen back into my old habits. I'm certainly no worse off. There's no, other than occasionally where I have to explain to my doctor why my kidney function is lower than it was, a few years ago. And I tell him every single time it's because I only have one kidney. But no, there's nothing physically that I have that, and they're not going to let anybody do this if they're not going to be in the health to do it. The exams that you take, the preparation is like if you're going to go to space. I mean, CAT scans, EKGs, a full battery of blood work. In fact, one of the doctors told me it was over a $15,000 value of what the exam was. So they screen you for everything. I mean, I think Sarah even had some. They thought maybe she had something else. This is Harrison's wife. They thought maybe she had some other problem. It turned out, thank God, it wasn't. But you're literally going to get screened for everything. So they're going to check and see if you have, cancer, or if you have, some sort of other thing that, underlying circumstance. And they're not going to do it unless you're 100% physically able to do it. And I think that's why the statistics are so good for people for the longevity studies, is because they tend to be much more healthier people that end up giving these donating these kidney, that sort of thing. So, but the actual procedure, I want to say took like 3 or 4 hours. I recovered in the hospital for a few days. I was home. I was walking around within a week. I was taking walks with my wife. I was back to work within 3 weeks. I was driving in that same period of time. I was running within 6. So yeah, I couldn't honestly say there's anything about it that I have physically long-term. Now, if I'm in a car accident, if I have something like that, there could be, I don't want to play contact sports. There's certain things that, you don't want to do. You want to be really careful. You want to protect, what you have. But, anybody, that could happen to anyone. And we could all have been born like that. There could be, it's something that is a redundant organ in your body in the event, it's actually, from what they look at it, they think evolutionary wise, because human beings used to eat such crazy stuff and drink such weird water, they would damage their kidneys in the old days. And they really needed a redundant backup kidney. But you don't need that anymore now. And here's the other thing. Here's the great thing. Let's just say that I do someday need a kidney. I'm top of the list. I would be the number one person put on the list. As a donor, you're eligible. You're the first person eligible. You jump in front of everybody if you need one. So that's a pretty good, I'm not saying incentive, but that's a pretty good comforting thing to know that if I ever need this, I could get one. Now, clearly that's something you wouldn't want to do. I've seen with Harrison, I didn't know enough to know that, I didn't know Harrison was going to be on medications for the rest of his life to suppress his immune system. I didn't realize that this was a constant monitored thing. I thought he gets the kidney, we're, good matches and there you go. But that isn't really how it works. There is a struggle afterwards to make sure that, that all works. So I don't want to discount the fact that, okay, I'm top of the list, but that's still, I don't want to be in that situation. I see what he goes through, to do that, but I don't think it's not a concern of mine in any way.
Very good.
Yeah, I would say just kind of, I know probably I would have to say one of the first things Brian would ask, what's the timeline, what's the process, which he touched a little bit on. Extensive testing. It was roughly 4 months, I think, from the time that Brian said, yes, I'm interested. And he started the first round of interviews and exams. From the time we had the surgery was about 4 months. There's absolutely no cost to the donor. The recipient's insurance or Medicare, Medicaid, whatever, covers all that cost. There's no cost at all to the donor. And also, and they make this very clear, there's no way any kind of financial compensation. I think it's really important because there is some maybe misconception out there for people who are not involved or know about the process. No way, shape, or form can there be any kind of financial compensation involved with it either. I mean, you're clearly doing this out of the sheer goodness of your heart or the betterment of humanity or whatever the reason is. It's not a financial reason.
Now, some states do allow a tax deduction for a gift, but Kentucky, unfortunately, where I live, is not one of those states.
Yeah, he gets to deduct me as his dependent.
Yeah. Could, in theory, get a tax deduction as a one-time gift, but I think it's like $15,000 or something. But nobody would. I mean, if you wouldn't do it for that, obviously. Right. The process is actually really, really, and Christ really knows what they're doing. They have this down. I mean, you have basically a main administrator person who's kind of oversees the whole process, and then you meet with psychiatrists / psychologists who want to understand what your motivation is, want to understand how your feelings are, and they could veto at any point if they think you're not mentally capable of doing it, or they think it would be a bad idea, or you're doing it for the wrong reasons, or you feel pressured in any way. And that's why I would say to people, if you're tested and you decide you don't want to do it, you could just tell them to just tell the person that it's not a good fit, and they basically just go back and say you're going to need to find another donor. But I met with the doctors repeatedly. They gave me a really good idea by the time it finally occurred what was going to happen. And I would say, if anything, the pain was probably less than I thought. You're always more afraid of what's going to happen and how it's going to be and that sort of thing. But I remember speaking to my mother the night before, and she said, a year goes by like just sand through the hourglass. Time flies. It'll be 3 years before you know it. And here we are, 3 years later, and it's your body heals very quickly. And the science on this is now so good, and what they can do with. So the other thing is, part of my story too would be my father has a twin brother whose first wife had juvenile diabetes. And she had one of the very first kidney transplants. She also had a twin. It was a fraternal twin. And the kidney transplant was done in Rochester in 1976. And because at the time they didn't have really good immune suppressant drugs and drugs to help her body not reject, anti-rejection drugs, she did eventually die from it. So, and she was a wonderful woman, and my uncle's a great guy. And I always kind of thought in the back of my head that, it would have been really nice if we could have had the science a little better off. And now, I mean, the science is excellent. I mean, Harrison, you're taking one of the pioneering drugs right now, aren't you?
Actually, I was pretty lucky. Christ Hospital was one of the few hospitals that had done the original trial on one of the current medications. I had a lot of really bad side effects initially with one of the primary drugs they used. And since Christ was one of the, one of the study locations for this medication, they were able to switch me over to it. And I've been on it for 3 years now. And it's actually been, a lot better medication for me than the other option. And there are probably people that are on that medication that suffer some of the side effects I did. They just didn't have access to it. And going back to what Brian had alluded through the testing part, they don't, even though Brian and I were best friends and they knew, everyone in that hospital knew that we were best friends, they don't share our information with each other. They let me know absolutely nothing about what was going on with Brian through his testing procedures. Yeah, absolutely nothing. And vice versa. They let him know nothing about what was going on with me. Now, after the surgery was over and we're basically in the recovery room together and in the hospital together, it was kind of a little different story. But through that, kind of alluding to what Brian said, at any point in time, he could have just told me, hey, I'm not a match. And I wouldn't know anything different because they don't share any of that information at all. So I just would like to, put that out there in case somebody's even interested. Hey, maybe I'll start the process. Don't worry, don't hesitate, because, Bob or however you're going to go through the process, they would not know anything at all about what you're doing unless whatever you tell them would be the only way they would know it. And Brian was sharing all of this information with me, but and occasionally I would ask our coordinator, which we actually even had 2 different coordinators.
We had basically different teams.
Yeah, other than the surgeons, which we had 2 different surgeons, but it's the two surgeons do all the organ transplants for UC and Christ, except for heart transplants. And these guys are rocket scientists. They literally look like doctors out of central casting for some movie. I'd always honestly thought I would have had this done at Cleveland Clinic because that's where I had a lot of experience from. And I kind of just went to Christ because, I live a few miles away and it's like, what the heck, check it out. And then once I'd met with Dr. Cuffey and Dr. Paterno at the time, they're still the main surgeons. I mean, these guys are literally, we're lucky to have some of the best surgeons in the United States, here in Cincinnati.
And you're talking about a surgeon that my surgeon, all he does is remove the kidney, and all Harris's surgeon does is connect the kidney. So it's that specialized. He actually joked to me one point. I said, so what happens after it comes out of me? And he goes, we don't care about that. That's not our problem. We just take the kidney. So that's their problem once they do that. So
guys,
definitely have that figured out.
Closing thoughts for our potential donors to help Bob either directly or through the network. You've obviously shared some really good information to help allay fears. Just parting thoughts to potential donors. Harrison, what do you think?
Well, me and Bob have no choice. And honestly, it's, the quality of life versus being on dialysis is unbelievable. My mom was on dialysis for 2.5 years prior to getting her transplant almost 16 years ago at University of Kentucky. And I saw what she went through daily. And I'll be honest, I was, it was a big concern of mine. It was like, at the time I was 40, 44, 45, I work an active job. And in my mind, I'm like, how can I do this by taking 8 to 10 hours 3 times a week at minimum doing dialysis? So, my quality of life has been totally different than it would have been, had I been on dialysis or not got a transplant. And I'll be honest, you can't be on dialysis indefinitely. I think the average dialysis patient is about 4.5 years. So it's definitely not a cure by any means. And it's not even a long-term solution. But I would say, all in all, the Christ Hospital team is amazing. If you start the process, they will answer any and every question that you would ever imagine you'd want. And like I said, I have a brother for life through this, but yeah.
Brian, final thoughts?
I would just say that to kind of echo what Harris is saying is that they're absolutely, I think they're the best. I mean, I've looked around at some of the different clinics that do this and their way that they have it set up, and there really is no pressure. I think the idea, if you're interested in doing it, the first thing I would tell you is to discuss it with your immediate family, get their feelings on it, pray. I prayed a lot during that time frame, and my prayers were answered several times in different ways. I don't want to sound crazy, but in dreams and in little things that happened to me, and just I just knew it was the right thing to do. In fact, the doctor actually told me that we're probably more likely than anything to be related, because the odds of what we had are like in the millions. His mother would only be a 1 in 25% chance to have the same, I'm sorry, 25% chance of having the same matching abilities that we had. And your sister wasn't even a good match, if I remember correctly, right?
Not as close, yeah.
Family. So I would say discuss with them, pray, and don't fear it, and feel like it could be something that, if it's right for you and you're healthy and you're in good shape, this is a thing that if I could take it back, I wouldn't. I mean, this is, like I said, it's definitely one of the most important things I've ever done in my life. And I think about it every day. I literally think about it every single day. I think about how, like if I cut someone off in a car, or do something kind of crappy, I think, well, at least I gave a kidney to somebody. It's kind of a comforting thought that, someday maybe, that Peter's Gate, I could be like, hey guys, but they would know that it was as good for me as it was for him. And it's been an outstanding experience. And I would also say that if you're watching this video and you think you want to talk more, I would be happy to meet with you, call you, talk to your family members, whatever it would take that would, and I'm not saying I will not sell you. I've been in sales for a good period of my life, and I'm good at sales, but I wouldn't sell anyone on this. It's not something that it has to be a decision that you make, and that you have to really be committed and want to do it. But that said, it's the most rewarding thing I can imagine. So.
Well, guys, thank you both. And we will invite anyone watching this video that does want to perhaps touch base with you to simply leave a comment on Facebook, and we'll connect the two parties for further discussion. Guys, thank you for your support of Bob and what we're trying to do for him. And we'll get this video.
He's a great guy. And I would like to add one thing. Bob did a lot to try and fix this on his own. Bob lost a ton of weight. I feel like he actually got his diabetes in check at one point. That's why I was kind of just sad to hear that he needed this, because I thought that he had kind of fixed it as well as he could. But he's definitely, as far as worthy recipients go, he's someone who has worked hard to try and fix his own health. And anyone that knows him, he's one of the nicest guys. He'd give the shirt off his back to you. And I have no doubt whatsoever that the same with Harrison. This could be completely flipped. Harrison could be explaining to you right now why he gave me a kidney. I know Bob would give one if he could, and I know Harrison would give me one if I needed one. So I think that's an important thing to think about, that Bob's a really worthy guy of this gift.
Well, guys, thank you very much. And we'll get this up on Facebook as quickly as you can, so to spread the word. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Cameron. Thanks a lot, guys.